We have a guest here on our show today. What is your name?
Dovi.
Dovi. And how old are you?
8.
8 years old. What school do you go to?
Weitzner Cheder.
Weitzner Cheder. What language do they speak in the school?
Yiddish.
Yiddish. So do you know Yiddish?
Yes.
Wow. Are your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, do you have any Hasidic ancestry?
Yeah.
You do? Do you know who?
No.
No? So maybe we'll have to learn. Tell me one more question. Do you know who Aunt Pauline is?
Yes.
Yes. Who is Aunt Pauline?
My great aunt.
Yay, very good. And do you know who cousin Adele is?
Yes.
Who's cousin Adele? When was the last time you met her?
Probably, my last time I met her was by the air conditioner when we got the air conditioner from her.
She was very kind to us. She gave us an air conditioner. And who is cousin Adele's mother?
Aunt Pauline.
Is cousin Adele very close with Savta Lois?
Yes.
Okay, yay. Very good. Aunt Pauline. Providing people with emotional support, that's also big time. That's supporting Torah. When someone's in yeshiva, they could feel low, they could feel bad, the facilities are dirty, like we heard from Ellie, from the stories over there, and you get a package in the mail, that could literally change everything. So that is something that's very important, and that's something that hasn't been included. So Dovi, would you like to learn a mishna on Pirkei Avos?
Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. So we have a mishna. Okay, Pirkei Avos, Perek Vav, Mishnah Dalid. Kachi darcha shel Torah, so is the way of Torah. Paspa melech tochal, bread and salt you should eat. Umayim b'mishur tishta, and rationed water shall you drink. Al haaretz tishan, on the ground you should sleep. V'chayei tzar tichya, a life of pain you should live. Uvetorah ata omel, and in Torah you should toil. Im ata osakein, if you do this, ashrecha v'tovlach, you're praised, and it's good for you. Ashrecha b'olam hazeh, praiseworthy are you in this world, v'tovlach olam haba, and it's good for you in the next world. So, Dori, what do you think of that mission? Does it make you want to learn? So Rav Moshe Meir Lublin, the founder of Daf Yomi, when he made a yeshiva in Lublin, it was a very luxurious yeshiva. And some of the Talmidim or some of the Balabatim, whoever it was, they came up to him and they showed him this Mishnah. They said, Rebbe, how could you go ahead and make such a luxurious yeshiva with such nice beds and such nice things? Look at the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos. This is not the way of Torah. It says, Kachi darcha shel Torah. This is the way of Torah. Paspa melech tochal, bread and salt you should eat. It says you should lie down on the ground, a life of pain. How could you go ahead and make such a beautiful yeshiva? So he answered back, he said, no. That's not the way to read the Mishnah. The way to read the Mishnah is Kachi darcha shel Torah. So is the way of Torah. Paspa melech tochal, bread and salt you should eat. He reads it with a question mark after each and every line. It's saying that this is not the way of Torah. So if you look in the Mefarshim actually kind of get his pshat to fit in a little bit. The pshat that we gave, when a person is learning Torah, they're orangutan and learning, their life, they have so much sipok hanefesh, that these things won't matter to them. There's no question if a person's given a bed, they should sleep on the bed. In fact, it would be kavod haTorah to sleep on the bed. They shouldn't sleep on the ground. But what we're saying is that someone who's living a life of Torah, they have it's such a life-giving force that it just doesn't bother them. The example that I like to give is when we had yeshiva bachrim that were putting up our sukkah, and they showed up. It was pouring rain. They showed up at 1 o'clock in the morning. And we offered them a coat. They don't need a coat. They're coming in the middle of the night. It really doesn't matter. When you have, I know from when I was in yeshiva, people come over to sleep. If you have a bed for them, that's wonderful. If you don't have a bed, then you don't have a bed. So if you have bread, good. If no bread, then also it's fine. So it's actually saying something very inspirational, because it's saying that the way of Torah is so geschmack that you could even do these things and you'll be fine. Even if you're in this situation, you're still fine. That's one way to learn it. Moshe Meir Levin, that's another way to learn it. And that's something this mishna I thought is something that I would throw in, because we were just mentioning about receiving a package in the mail, yeshiva bachrim that would receive a package in the mail from Aunt Pauline. We were saying that it could pick people up when they're in yeshiva. I said the yeshivas could be dirty. Yeshivas are not dirty. They don't have to be dirty. Ner Yisrael has a nice, beautiful yeshiva, but a lot of times, maybe just being away from home. Maybe it should have been worded differently. Being away from home, but yeshivas could be a very enjoyable place. When people get into the learning, it's very geschmack, and they have very nice yeshivas nowadays. So, I remember my 8th grade Rebbe, he went to yeshiva, his siblings didn't, and someone asked his parents, what was your biggest regret about sending your son to yeshiva? And they said, our biggest regret is that we didn't send our other sons to yeshiva. We thank cousin Adele for all of the time and information that she contributed to making this podcast. As you're going to hear the interview with her at the end, which eventually takes on more of a conversation style. Thank you. Right now, January 23rd, 2025, me and Sivya, or as they say, Sivya and me, we just listened to this really nice long interview with cousin Adele that we had today. And cousin Adele spoke about certain values that I wanted to speak about first, but then we're going to ask Sivya some questions, or she's going to help remind me of what some of my thoughts were. One of the values that cousin Adele spoke about was the idea of calling someone cousin, putting the word cousin first, or aunt, or uncle, and not just calling them by first name. So one of the things that it seems like I suggested, but maybe she did also, is that it's a more respectful way to refer to someone. But she also brought up the idea that it's important to do that so that the person knows the relationship. And the example she gave was buying Eli Polsky's son. I think she said she got him a bar mitzvah present, so she signed it cousin Adele. So Baruch Hashem, Eli knows who cousin Adele is, but now his son also knows who it is. I guess in a family like mommy's family, where everybody is just so close, you don't even need to do that. It's just it's almost like creating a distance just by doing that. Of course, I know who you are. So then we come on to just respect. So the real way to do it, up until at least this generation, and is to call people by, would say, Aunt Phyllis, Aunt Pauline, Uncle Jerry, Uncle the various people, cousin Adele, cousin Judy. That's one thing that came out from this interview. So I had some thoughts of my own, very interesting reflections. And if we always have to have some noise in the background. Shh. All right, the first thing that stands out, like like anything, is the soldier section. So I'm gonna ask Sivya to see if she could explain to me what was going on over there. Okay, let's go.
Like they had like soldiers come.
We're gonna come back to the soldiers, but actually, there's something even more shocking. A couple weeks ago, and I was trying to figure out more about the family, so I had this interview with Eli Polsky. And there's pictures up in people's homes, and I was trying to figure out if if his name was Julius, or it seems like maybe his name was Yoel Eliezer. So to me, like, I'm hearing about these names for the first time, or at least I'm processing it for the first time. But I found out today, this person who I'm asking Ellie about the name and everything, well, it turns out we have family in Eretz Yisrael who are being moiser nefesh to go to this person's grave. So it's a family that the Arabs are shooting. The Arabs are shooting, and apparently, when cousin Adele went to Eretz Yisrael right after her daughter made Aliyah, she wanted to go visit the grave of Yoel Eliezer, which the story goes that he died from starvation. Which, by the way, in the interview, I really liked the way she worded it as Eretz Yisrael. It's just because sometimes you read about he died in Palestine, he died, I don't know. But Eretz Yisrael is the best way to word it. So he passed away in Eretz Yisrael, died from starvation. So she wanted to go see the grave. Okay. So Eddie said it's not safe to go there. The Arabs are shooting, and you have to go with an armed, I think just someone who's armed, either bodyguard, something like that. Okay. But her daughter went with her friend to the grave just without being armed. So, like, while I'm trying to figure out who the person is, we have another family member who feels the person is so important that they are being moiser nefesh to get to the person's grave. So that's a very impressionable thing from the interview today. It's just like, it's mind-boggling stuff, really. Totally mind-boggling. So cousin Adele was saying that she lived in between an army base and an Air Force base. So I don't know enough about bases to know what is what. I know I once got locked in an army base. I almost had to spend the night in an army base the summer of 2023. But whatever it is, the soldiers ended up at Aunt Pauline's house, which is cousin Adele's mother. They ended up at her house. And here's another amazing idea, though. You see, cousin Adele described her house as, she lived in an apartment. She really was misameach b'chalko. I mean, that she said to her, wealth was family. And she always grew up feeling wealthy, even though it was just an apartment, but she grew up feeling wealthy because of all the family that they had. And this story about the soldiers is just a very, it's a very hachnasas orchim. The family has to be hachnasas orchim oriented to do that. You're training the children to give up their bed for the soldier. She basically said Sunday morning, she didn't know whether she would be waking up on the floor of some part of the apartment, or would she be waking up in her bed. So her and Irving, she must have been really little then, because her and Irving shared the bedroom. And there were times where if the soldier didn't make it to the house before Shabbos, they would arrive after Shabbos. And there's some confusion a little bit about the soldier, but he would arrive. And if he arrived, so then cousin Adele was picked up and moved to a different part of the apartment. And the soldier was, I almost said cousin soldier, but not cousin soldier, but the soldier was put into cousin Adele's bed. And cousin Adele went to a different part of the apartment without knowing. It was the middle of the night. So she didn't know whether she was getting up, or she didn't know exactly where she would be Sunday morning. So, okay, and then it was pointed out that she doesn't think that that's something that went on in Gramps' house, my father's house, or Grandma Papa Joe's house. Papa Joe. But one would think, why not? Why wouldn't it have gone on there? So I don't know. They didn't live in an apartment. So maybe it's to Aunt Pauline's credit, big time, that maybe this was a big time thing. Maybe this was something big, and maybe the Achnasas Orchim expressed itself in other ways in Gramps' all these terms. Papa Joe's house. Aunt Pauline would go and start baking cookies after Hanukkah to send to the various nephew yeshiva bachurim to arrive by Purim. So what we were trying to figure out is, why was the project such a big project that it had to start right after Hanukkah, and then you had to put the stuff into the freezer and prepare everything? Why was it such a big project? But regardless of why or whatever, there were cookies made in a very thoughtful way. The whole thing is very thoughtful. Just to mail an envelope really could be very difficult nowadays. For me, it's hard just to mail an envelope. You have to get the envelope, you have to get the stamp, you have to get tape, you have to get all these things together. And it takes a lot of care and thinking to go ahead and decide to mail stuff, cookies and popcorn and these things to your nephews. Your nephews. And the big shocker over here is the salami. The salami that ended up Teddy, and it wasn't called the Korean War, it was the Korean conflict. Now, so Korea, isn't Korea in Africa? Is Mommy's home? Isn't Korea... Somehow the salami arrived in Africa untouched. Meanwhile, he comes in. The salami arrived untouched, or it was in good condition. Unless there's some... Alright, so we have the Korea conflict. Teddy, we know that he started off in Torah Vedas at some point, but he made it into the Korea conflict, the Korea War. And one of the things that cousin Adele mentioned is that Aunt Pauline, it's not just that she went out of her way to make these cookies and to do all that, but it's the way it was done. She wrapped up each cookie in aluminum foil. I think when I listened to it the second or third time around, it sounded like it might have even been put into the popcorn bag itself. But either way, there were two things that were accomplished by putting the cookie into this aluminum foil. Number one, it's to prevent the cookie from falling apart. But number two is that even if the cookie does fall apart, you'll be able to eat all of the broken pieces. So she really had this thing all thought out. And as we spoke about before, nothing is more exciting when you're in sleepaway camp and you get a package. And Yerucham is making a lot of noise because he doesn't know how to talk yet. And to him, when I'm speaking, it just sounds like I'm making a lot of noise. So, and he does whatever, he likes to imitate what he sees. So the louder then I talk louder to talk over him, but then he gets louder. So, but Baruch Hashem, he's going into Yaya's room. So, cousin Adele's father, Abe Funk, he came to America with his two brothers in 1909. The two brothers were Morris and Julius. Morris Funk and Julius Funk. Her mother married her. Right, her mother is related to us through her father. There were 4 intermarriages. I know some people say there were 2. There's 4 intermarriages. Intermarriages means between Funk and Zephyrin, left in somewhere in there. There were 4 intermarriages, and we were talking about at the end how perhaps that's how I suggested that maybe that's how the family stayed so close, because we all lived in the same area in St. Louis in that generation, and there were 4 intermarriages, and maybe that helped it. But she pointed out something very interesting, and also what she did is she told a story, and in that story you basically got all of any question you would want to ask was answered in that story. So it was done it's almost like she had to have prepared for this, but in any case, right, she said what actually was happening was her father owned a cap company. Did this sound familiar? Funk Caps. Here's where we're making a little correction here. All 3 brothers started the company together. The name of the company was Funk Brothers Hat and Cap Company. And they employed the other members of the family, and the Leftons had a company too, scrap metal, and they employed some Funks, like Sam Funk. So people stayed in the same area because of that. On that note, on the note that providing others with employment, as we just heard that the Funk brothers did, and even the Leftons, I'm just going to read to you that we know that that's the highest level of tzadaka. So we look at the mitzvah of tzadaka. The Rambam tells us this is the Mishnah Torah, the laws of tzadaka, 10:7-14. I'm actually reading this translation from Chabad.org, that there are 8 levels of tzedakah, each greater than the next. The greatest level, above which there is no greater, is to support a fellow Jew by endowing him with a gift or loan, or entering into a partnership with him, or finding employment for him in order to strengthen his hand so that he will not need to be dependent upon others. Rav Yochanan Zweig also says that building a person's self-esteem, that is included in this. One of the mitzvahs of tzedakah. It's quoted throughout the Chumash in several places, but in one place it could be translated to mean building self-esteem, because there's nothing more important than that when it comes to getting a job. So that's the highest level. We're going to hear later on in this episode about someone who did tzedakah in a very special way, which is almost the highest level, not the highest level, but we'll talk about it at that time. Oh, the tefillin story. Right. So the tefillin story. So let's go back to the tefillin story. One thing that needs to be known before we say this tefillin story is that Abe Funk, cousin Adele's father, was someone who was a master at calligraphy, and he used his right hand for that. So that's something where he was blessed with special talent in his right hand. Now we go to the story. A lot of times you find that it's the very body part that you use the most. It's in that area where Hashem decides to put you through a nisayon. And unfortunately, he had to have his arm amputated. His right arm was cut off. It had to be cut off by the doctors. And it's the detail, on a Friday, he was given the news on a Friday, I don't know, I'm just saying, and he went to the bank on Monday to make sure all the accounts were okay. Tuesday is when the arm was actually taken off. And over Shabbos, what he kept doing is he kept figuring out basically how he could get his tefillin. He didn't use the pair of tefillin, but he was trying to figure out how to get his tefillin on with just the left arm. So he made circular motions with the left arm, and learned how to put tefillin on with the help of Aunt Pauline. And the only day he missed tefillin was the day that they amputated his arm. He missed tefillin on that day. But because of his mesiras nefesh for the mitzvah of tefillin, so the mitzvah of tefillin became very chaviv in that family. So how did it express itself? So the thing is that cousin Adele only had daughters. So we didn't get to see it that generation. But the mitzvah of tefillin was very precious to her. This is something that her father was very moiser nefesh to do. And when I listened to the recording, I heard it differently. And it's the fact he was getting it on his left hand without a right arm. That's a major thing over here. It's not just that because he never missed. The only time he missed was the day of the surgery. So, but there was a big thing after. So there's two big things: the consistency, okay, and the getting the tefillin on, preparing to get it on without the right arm, even with the help of Aunt Pauline. But he had to do some of it himself. So the bar mitzvah present that she gave to her grandkids was money for tefillin. So the mitzvah tefillin was very precious. So to them. All right. Funk, Grandpa Funk. So with him, he had one of his daughters was Jean. So cousin Adele said some stories say 7, some say 9. I saw in the interview it says 10. So there might be a third version of 10, but that's when she was put on the boat. We didn't talk about the boat in this little interview here, but it's documented. The boat where they really did not treat her well at all. And she was put into this boat, and she was put onto the bottom of the boat, and the boat had a hole in it. And the boat was sinking the entire time. It was a 2-week trip from Europe to America. It was 2 weeks. The boat was barely sinking, and it only started sinking maybe halfway there, but it was sinking. And it had a famous name, and this boat, it really sunk. People... It's like, it wasn't the Titanic, but it was a different boat. So, and I just happened to know that when she came to America, she waited around for an hour and a half all by herself. She waited for someone to pick her up. We didn't talk about that in the interview. So, but her mother's name, that was Niftaris, was Sarah Rivka maybe. But so Adele's name is like Sarah Rivka Udal. She's named after both of those wives. I know for sure there's a Sarah in it, because they kept dying. They just got married again. So Yitzchak Meir didn't have any children with the third wife, but he had children with the first and the second. So Dorothy came from his second wife. Burton and Lester are sons to Jean.
Who's Jean?
Jean is the 10-year-old girl. The 9-year-old girl. She's a daughter. She saw her father for the first time when she was 10. Right, maybe I'm getting the stories mixed up. Aunt Pauline, by the way, Aunt Pauline reminds me of Savta Tzivia big time. Like just the Hanukkah parties, that apartment, and inviting. She also had an apartment, right? Right, and the whole place was there, just in this apartment. So.
Didn't she have like the whole thing? Like she had like.
I know, yeah, but she had other people live. Right, but everyone was only on one floor in one apartment.
Because you're also getting mixed up. Because like, wasn't when South City was little, she was like on a boat, and then like. She was playing with like a ball or something, and the ball fell in the ocean, and then,
right.
And then she was trying to get it or something, and she was like gonna jump in, but then somebody saved her.
Maybe Jean saved her? Were they on the same boat?
It was like from Florence, America, I think, or something.
Right, so maybe they were on the same boat. But I think her boat was also sinking. I think both of them were put on the bottom of the boat, and they were both sinking.
Well, if they were sinking, then how did they raise such a big family?
They got it. They managed to reach land. It didn't sink for good until its second trip. That's when it totally went down. But it was already going down on its way to America. But on the way back to Poland is when it totally went. I read it in the interview. You could see, and it even made it on the news. Like the one interviewing her, like she's like, "Oh, that was the famous blah blah blah." Like it wasn't the Titanic, but it was like famous like that. It was like, oh, because each of these ships had a name. So, all right, so there's similar stories. I mean, it seems like some of the details were just there because it's part of the story. The details, the meatballs, Hanukkah, the presents that came from the dime store, and I just want to show that I was listening. The meatballs, the spaghetti, and what else was there? There was a third thing. I don't think she mentioned donuts, right? She did mention something about cholent on Shabbos. Did I take that part out? Gramps made cholent with her husband, Art. So you didn't hear that part. And she said, and Gramps ate cholent. Right, I can't even picture it.
I can't even, he doesn't even eat, bananas.
I know there was a lot of laughing going on with me and my daughter. I just wanted to say that the matter, however, was a very serious matter. The story is that Aunt Jean, she went on a boat. She was 10 years old. I'm looking at the interview right now. So Aunt Jean says, you see, my father sent a ticket, first class passage on a boat. At that time, the boat took 2 weeks on the water, at least. So, and she said, and it left from Bremen. It left from Bremen, Germany. And she says the guy who does the work, the ticket guy, the travel agent, she says cheated her and did not give her first class. They put her at the bottom of the ship, steerage. So Sue asked her, so you came steerage? She said, yeah. And the name of the ship was called Pretoria. Now there's a note here. It says the Pretoria usually sailed out of the port of Hamburg. Until this manifest is found, you will not know for sure if it was Bremen or Hamburg. And she says Pretoria. Oh, and that was the name of the ship that sank. And Aunt Jean says the same one. Because that ship sank not long after I came here. And Israel in the background, Uncle Israel, he says, in World War I, it sank. It was an old ship, and it was sinking when I was on it, said Aunt Jean. It leaks. And they were with the brooms, with all the water that was coming on there. And Henry, he said, oh, right, you were way down where the water was coming in. So Sue said, you must have been frightened when you saw all of that. Aunt Jean said she was scared to death. She was all by herself. So before the ship, because he did that, he swindled her and wasn't honest, that I had to cross the border and they didn't see us, had to keep out of sight a whole group of people. So Henry, you mean from Poland into Germany? She said from Poland to Germany. Because you didn't have the right ticket? Because I didn't have any ticket, said Aunt Jean. No papers at all. Whatever the travel agent did, he was dishonest. So I crossed the border in water. Sounds like they were on foot, and they were shooting in the water. So over their heads. Jean said, and they arrested us. She was arrested. She was arrested even before she got on the ship. So before she even got into Germany, she was arrested. And she said, yeah, I was arrested and I had to go to court. I remember, and they asked me where I was going. Then I remember somebody telling me to say I was going to Malava. I don't know why that. There must be a city. And Sue said there is a city, Malaga in Spain. Well, that's different. I was going to Malaga for a wedding. And he knew darn well I wasn't going to no wedding, but at least they let me go. So then the question asked to her is, so then when you get on the boat and endure quite a bit of hardship going on this boat, which is less than comfortable if you went steerage, and you got to New York, now is someone supposed to meet you there in New York? And Jean said, nobody came. I don't know what happened. And she said, who was supposed to meet you? She said, I don't know. Uncle Israel said, Julius. It must have been Julius. And she said, anyway, I came to New York and everybody is gone already from embarking, and I'm still sitting in Ellis Island. And people say to me, oh, they'll send you back. And she said, now what language did you speak? She said, only Jewish. We had a woman in Ellis Island who spoke Jewish. She said, Polish. Did you speak Polish? She said, no, Polish I can never talk, said Jean. Sue said, you couldn't speak Polish, so the only language you knew to speak was Yiddish. Jean said she spoke only Jewish. She was a German woman there in the court, immigration, and she spoke Jewish, and so they wanted to know why nobody came for me. And then Jerome said, so you were sitting at Ellis Island? And then Jean said, I was sitting there. And she said, and you had a tag on you? And she said, sure, I had more than one tag, all kinds of tags. She said, it had your name, and so what did you do? And she said, so finally Julius must have. So Jerome had shown up? No, called Ellis Island, or I don't know how he got in touch with them. I didn't have to go back to Europe. So Uncle Julius somehow called Ellis Island. They released you? Yes, they released me. They didn't send you back. They didn't send me back. I thought, sure, because the people were saying that I was scared to death they'd send me back. Where? They'd kill you. If you went back. So I didn't go to St. Louis then. Julius took me to Keokuk, Iowa. Keokuk. I stayed 2 nights there with Julius. Now, what was Uncle Julius doing there for a living? So he had 2 stores. Then Israel and Jean both said he owned 2 stores. One in Keokuk and one in... Now Sue said now he was a man of about 20 years old. And he had 2 stores? That's all. His age. And he owned 2 stores. And we said, where was the other store? In Ottawa or Fort Madison? In Hamilton. Hamilton, Illinois? No, Iowa. You see, Hamilton, Illinois is right across the river from us, Rock Island. It's across the river, the Mississippi. Because he used to go back and forth there. So he came and met me at Ellis Island and put me on a train to Keokuk. Keokuk. And I came to Keokuk. And I stayed 2 days or 2 weeks, I don't remember, to his Gentile friend, a very good friend of Julius. She had a girl the same age as me. And then they put me on the train to St. Louis. And I was on the train with Julius to St. Louis. And my father was standing on the corner. I had never seen my father, not even a picture. You never saw a picture? Not a picture. I was so scared. So Sue said, so at 10 years old, that was your first glimpse of your father? And she said, yeah. So what happened when you saw him? Jean says to me, that's your father standing out there. That's what Julia said. That's your father. Her father was waiting for the streetcar that they were riding. Today we had the very special schus of hearing from Adele, cousin Adele. She starts off speaking about a story of her mother. We'll listen, and then I'm going to say a couple reflections.
I want to tell you a story about your Aunt Pauline. When I was growing up, Aunt Dorothy had a deep freeze, a chest freezer in her basement. And we lived on Westminster, 5788 Westminster. And she lived about 2.5 blocks from us on DeGiverville. After Hanukkah every year, my mother, who was a fabulous baker, started baking cookies, all different kinds of cookies, and freezing them in Aunt Dorothy's freezer. In January beginning of February, my father would bring home fresh boxes from the business, because he owned Funk Brothers Hat and Cap Company along with his two brothers. And we would sit Motzi Shabbos at the dining room table, and we would start packing up cookies. She would cut little pieces of aluminum foil in a square big enough to put one cookie in each square. And then we would wrap the foil up, and she would pop fresh popcorn and fill the boxes with popcorn and put the cookies in the popcorn, so that she would send them before Purim to all the boys, her nephews, at yeshiva. And the only one that was different was the one going to Teddy, because he was in Korea. They called it Korean conflict. They didn't call it a war in those days. And she put a salami in his. And that's what went to all her nephews who were at yeshiva, to Lester, to Teddy, to Korea rather, and to all the other boys who were like at Skokie Yeshiva, to Burton and Jerry. And so I thought you would probably want to know about that happened every year for so many years. Then, in addition to that, we lived in a third-floor walk-up apartment with only 2 bedrooms and a sunroom. The sunroom was my brother Byron's room, and Irving and I stayed in the back bedroom. And every Hanukkah, my mother had all of the Funks, all of the Zephrins and their extended family for a Hanukkah party. My mother would bake fresh cookies, Hanukkah cookies, and she would make meatballs and spaghetti and a salad, and every child got a present. We would sit on the floor, and the adults would sit on the furniture, and we would open. It was like a sea of wrapping paper. And the gifts probably came from the dime store, it was called a 5 and Dime. It was on Delmar and DeBoliver. And Aunt Jean and Aunt Faye lived at the other end of Westminster. They lived in the same building across the hall from each other, I believe. Uncle Sam and Aunt Dorothy, the first Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Sam's first wife, lived the next street on Kingsbury, and the next street on McPherson lived Uncle Julius and Aunt Seal. And so that was wonderful. My mother gave those Hanukkah parties every year until we moved to the suburbs, which was when I was 13 years old. So it was a lot of years of Hanukkah parties. In addition, we lived between an Army base and an Air Force base. And I never knew on Sunday morning if I should step down or push up, because in the winter, if a soldier couldn't get to us before Shabbos, he would come after Shabbos, so my mother would pick me up off of my bed, give the soldier my bed in the same room with Irving, and I would, in the morning, Sunday morning, that's why I didn't know whether I should step down because I was getting out of bed, or push up because I was getting off the floor. And we didn't have a sleeping bag. We didn't have a mattress on the floor. She put down a sheet, put down a pillow, gave me a blanket, and that was the name of the story.
So the soldier thing really throws me off, because why were there soldiers?
Because they had a mandatory draft back when I was growing up. So there was an Army base and an Air Force base. The Army base was Fort Leonard Wood, which was further. The Air Force base was in Belleville area, which was closer.
So did my father and his house, did they also have soldiers?
I don't think so. It was just what my mom did.
Going back to what you said earlier, your mom would bake these cookies.
That was different. The cookies were for Purim to send to her nephews who were in yeshiva.
And Teddy got salami.
He got a salami because he was in Korea. So
And somehow,
salami in addition to the popcorn and the cookies.
And somehow, I guess maybe it stayed good, or we don't know.
Of course it stayed good. And she said the reason she put one cookie in each square of foil was so that if the cookie should break, the boys could still eat the crumbs. It was all self-contained. You know, had she just put cookies in the popcorn, it could have gotten broken and be all mixed together. This way, each cookie was self-contained.
It's so thoughtful of her.
She was amazing.
I remember. When did your mom move to, like, what was it called? That neighborhood, in U City.
She moved out of the house into the apartment on I can't think of the name of it all of a sudden. Next door to the Flaxes. We lived on the first floor, and then the owner wanted that apartment, so we had to move upstairs.
Right. So I remember that apartment. I think my mom calls that place the ghetto, like that whole area.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you were speaking about Hanukkah and getting presents, just this memory came to me. I don't think it was Hanukkah, but I do remember being in that apartment when I was really little, and I got a yo-yo. Maybe it was Hanukkah, I don't know. Like, I remember her giving me one of those yo-yos that lights up. Everyone got like all the kids got a little present. So mine was a yo-yo, but I don't remember what time of year it was or why we got it.
Yeah, but she didn't have the Hanukkah parties when she was in that apartment. She had it when we lived on Westminster in the city.
Oh, yeah. So it must have been just the get-together or a birthday party.
The Hanukkah parties were well before you were born. Hanukkah parties were when I was a child until I was about 13. My mother baked all the cookies for Art and my wedding. And we got married Motzi Shabbos, December 23rd. So it was Erev Christmas. And we don't even have a picture of the things she made because the help packaged it all up and they stole it. So there isn't even a picture. What she used to make swans out of cookies and all kinds of phenomenal baking.
Where did your Aunt Pauline, your mom, where did she come from? What was her maiden name, or where did she come from?
She was born and raised in St. Louis. She lived actually on Westminster. That's how she met my father. My father's first wife. My father had a very, very challenging life. He was amazing. My father came to America in 1909 with my grandfather and with his two brothers, Uncle Julius and Uncle Morris. And while my grandfather was going to go back to Europe for my grandmother, she was killed. It was, I think, a pogrom in the village. And my great-grandfather took care of Aunt Jane until she got to be... One story I heard was she was 7, another I heard she was 9, that she came to America with a woman from the village who I was told became Grandpa Funk's second wife, who became your grandmother, okay? Your great-grandmother, I guess. And with the second wife, he had 3 kids. He had Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Sam, and Aunt Tilly. So altogether there were 7 kids. And then when she died, he married Adele. And that's, he had no kids with her. Adele was Grandpa Zephyrin, who wasn't really my grandfather, but we called him Grandpa Zephyrin. It was his wife's sister. And then they lived in St. Louis, and the kids, she lived with the kids all lived together with her and Grandpa Funk in St. Louis. And I'm named for my father's birth mother, who is Sarah Rivka, and Adele, who is the 3rd wife of Grandpa Funk.
Wow.
So
wow,
my
that's...
Hebrew name is Sarah Rivka Adele.
Wow, that's so amazing. Because, when I made one of these recordings, So I'm friends with the Nechama Minsker's great nephew. So he has a Hasidic background. So he messaged me, and he said he listened to our whole family history, and he's just amazed at Udal, at that name. He said, you should know that's a major Hasidic name. And he just couldn't get over the fact that I came from Hasidic descendants. But that I didn't know that. I didn't know that Udal is Hasidic or anything. But they say that Grandpa Funk was a Ger Chassid, or maybe his father was a Ger Chassid?
Yes, he was, because Lester, I understood, had his gartel. And Grandpa Funk went to Lumsa Yeshiva.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And my son-in-law Dove, he is also from Hasidim. His great-grandfather, he's a great-grandson of the Slonimer Rav.
So he also has Hasidic ancestry.
Right.
You mentioned someone who passed away in a pogrom, and I think it's the same person that Jean, in that interview,
that was Aunt Jean's mother, Sarah Rivka.
So,
that's for whom I'm named. I'm Sarah Rivka Udal.
So in that interview, the questioner, who was Sue, so Jean said that her mom walked across the street, and some anti-Semite just crashed into her.
She was killed by a horse. He trampled her. Yeah.
By a horse. Okay.
And Yoel Eliezer, who was her grandfather, he's buried on Har HaZeitzim. He died of starvation in Eretz Yisrael.
Oh, yeah.
And my daughter Aviva and a girlfriend. And when I went to Israel, when Aviva first moved to Israel, I wanted to go to his kever, and Eddie said we wouldn't go without an armored car because the Arabs were shooting down at people at that cemetery. My daughter Aviva went with a girlfriend with no armored car to Yoel Eliezer's kever.
Wow. I'm super fascinated by Dove also, like, just with the, at the levaya, there was Rav Chaim Kaniefsky's talmud, Rav Chaim Kaniefsky, who spoke. Do you have any idea how those two met?
Which person was it? The guy with the black hat?
Right. So his name is...
The guy with the black hat is Arla. His name is Arla Pessin. Okay?
Oh, wow.
His aunt was Esther Yaffe Pessin. Esther Yaffe went to the St. Huber Academy with me. She was in my class. She's from St. Louis.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? So that's her nephew. And when Dove started dating Aviva, Arla spoke of going cross country with Dove in a car. And they spent time at my house when Dove was pursuing Aviva.
Wow, that's amazing. So he really was friends with him, and there's even a St. Louis connection.
Yeah.
I've been in touch with him through email.
Pardon me?
I've been in touch with him through email because
Oh yeah.
I was just trying to figure out like who he was and how he was there, and he has this website that he's a really good storyteller, and he's coming to America soon. He said he would love to speak in the community here. And then he told me the price afterwards, and it's expensive. But Eli Polsky said that it's not expensive, and he might bring him to Cincinnati.
Okay, you could also present it to Rabbi Matangi. He may be interested in having him come and pay the price for that.
Oh. That's
because they do that all the time. They always have guest speakers.
Okay. It's so interesting how much, I guess, Achdus there is. I don't know if Achdus is the right word, but in Chicago in particular, the Tzioni part in Haredi part of Orthodoxy, like it seems to mix really well in Chicago, and I don't think it's like that on the East Coast.
Well, I know that. Well, first of all, Kins is very Zioni. Rabbi Matanki certainly is Zioni, and I would certainly reach out to him.
But this rabbi, if he's Rav Chaim Kaniefsky's talmud, if he is what I'm thinking that he is, like, he probably is not Zioni, right?
I don't know. You have to reach out to him. I don't know. I can't answer that.
I mean, it's fine. It's fine with me, but Rabbi Matanki seems pretty open-minded, so.
I think Rabbi Matanki is quite a fine man, and I respect him greatly. And also Rabbi Liptak, he's also very fine, very bright, and very fine.
And that's where my mom goes, I think. And what's interesting is that my father and Lester Zephyrin, for many years, they would sponsor someone to come into St. Louis in the yurt site of Dorothy Lefton. And her yurt site is coming up.
Yeah, it was in January. In fact, my mother said that when Aunt Dorothy died, she said, I not only lost my sister-in-law, I lost my best friend. And my mother had to return the dress that she had bought for Aunt Dorothy to wear to Judy's wedding, because Judy was married in January, and December, and Aunt Dorothy died in January.
So they were sister-in-laws and best friends.
Right. Mm-hmm. She and Jean and Aunt Dorothy were very close.
And my father was saying that. My sister, what's interesting is that she got married, her wedding just coincidentally fell out on Dorothy's yurt site. And my wedding coincidentally fell out on Papa Joe's yurt site. And therefore we had to delay the wedding by 1 day because my father was still in Ovel. So the wedding began before Shkia on his yurt site. It's just so weird that her wedding, they say at the chasana, the neshama of the ancestors comes down, and also they say the same thing on yurt sites. So it's just so weird that that happened.
And you know something else strange? When I was giving birth, Art and I got married on December 23rd. We got married Motzi Shabbos. When Art and I were getting married, Dove's mother was giving birth to Dove's oldest brother. We didn't know one another at all. So Dove's oldest brother's English birthday is Art and my anniversary.
Cool.
Yep. Lot of interesting connections. You never know. And I remember at the levaya for Sarit's grandmother Rita, Jeremy spoke, and I don't know if you remember this, but he talked about, I had given a recipe to Rita that I said, I'm giving it to you, but do not pass it on to anybody. And Jeremy spoke about that recipe at the levaya. I don't remember the context of it anymore. I was thinking about it last night, and I remember after the levaya, people kept coming up to me and saying, can I call you for the recipe? Can I call you for after a levaya? It was like crazy.
Is it the peanut butter cups?
Yep, you bet it is.
Right, those were pretty famous.
Yep, that was my recipe. Anyway, funny.
Do you know who, Ellie just told me, her last name is Cookie Kaufman. Do you know who that is?
It's Uncle Julius's youngest daughter. I'm in touch with her. She lives in New York.
Yeah, going back, you mentioned at some point in this conversation that you said your father was an amazing person. I think that's what you said. Right?
He was. He was.
Do you want to say more?
My father, as I told you, came to America when he was 9. And he got married. His first wife's name was Adelaide Borman was her maiden name, I believe. She was from Belleville. And then with her, he had my brother Byron. His mother died when Byron was either 3 or 4 years old, at which point my father went to live with Byron with Aunt Jean. And Aunt Jean lived on the same block in Westminster as we did, and as Aunt Faye did, and my mother. And that's how he met my mother. And then he married my mom, and with my mom, he had myself and my brother Irv. I'm older than Irv. And then my father, when my father was 60, he developed leukemia, but it was not debilitating. And then when he was 70, he developed a large mass on his right arm, and he was right-handed. My father had beautiful handwriting, almost like calligraphy. It was so fancy. And when he was 70, he had to have his right arm amputated. He was told that it had to be amputated. He was told on Friday, Erev Shabbos, that he had to have the amputation. So he scheduled it for Tuesday because he was right-handed and didn't know if he'd ever be able to write again. So on Monday, he wanted to go to the bank and sign everything over to my mom. And then he had his amputation. My father never, ever missed a day of learning tefillin except the day he had his surgery. He would get his left arm. Over Shabbos, he was practicing eating with his left hand because he was right-handed. And he would get his left arm in a circular motion, and that strap would like automatically wrap around his arm. And then my mother would have fixed the rest of the strap to his fingers for him to be able to learn tefillin. And that was the reason that Art and I decided when we had grandchildren that our gift to our grandchildren for bar mitzvah would be tefillin. And even in advance of their bar mitzvah, even when they were first born, we gave our sons-in-law money to put aside for tefillin for each of our grandsons. And that's been our bar mitzvah gift for all the time. And when Harry and Audrey got married, Alana arranged for my father's for Art's, not his tefillin, for Art's talis, for one of his talesim that he had, to be under the chuppah at Ari and Audrey's wedding.
Wow, it's amazing stuff. So your father, in a certain way, because of that one day of tefillin that he missed, and he probably felt bad, even though he didn't do anything wrong, but it was a day that he missed. But so everyone became aware that he never missed a day of tefillin, and that mitzvah became really precious to you, and you bought your grandchildren all tefillin, which is super expensive. Also, it's really amazing. So,
but you know what? To me, that wasn't expensive because I've always felt, first of all, that my Yiddishkeit is more important to me than a lot of things. To some people, it's fancy houses, it's fancy clothing. I've fancy jewelry. I've never been that person. I've always been so grateful. I thought living in a third-floor walk-up apartment with one bathroom and 2 bedrooms that we were rich. And you know what? We were, because we had family that we were so close with all the time that's richer than anything. You can't buy that. Okay? You can buy clothing, you can buy jewelry, but to me, none of that matters. As my grandmother would say, we all wear the same tachrichim in the end, and we only get so much space. So it doesn't matter how big your house is, or how many fancy dresses you have, or how much jewelry you have. In the end, none of that matters.
So you grew up in an apartment?
Yeah, third-floor walk-up apartment. Yeah.
So it's similar
with no
to
air conditioning. It was hot in the summertime.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
I mean, eventually we had one air conditioner in my parents' bedroom, So my mother was a decent-sized bedroom, as I recall, but then again, I was a little girl. She would put a card table in the bedroom, and we would eat in the bedroom. Once we had air conditioning, but for years we didn't have air conditioning. We had a box fan in the window. And we would take a washcloth and wet it down and put the washcloth over our face and let the fan blow on us, and that was our air conditioning. But again, I really thought I was wealthy.
Regarding family, probably the fact that so much of the family stayed in St. Louis, which Eli Polsky was telling me, maybe because there was a few, like, he called it intermarriages between Lefton and Zephyrin or Funk and...
It was more than a few. There were four. There were four intermarriages, and I'll tell you a reason. Also, I believe they all stayed. Because many years ago, corporations didn't hire Jews for the most part, unless you were a scientist, or they had their token secretary. So what did Jews never depended on the rest of the world to support them. They used their brains, and they opened their own businesses. So Funk Brothers Hat and Cap Company had all the Zephyrins working for them, okay? And Lefton Brothers had Uncle Sam working for them.
That was
all
Sam
right?
Funk?
Yeah.
That's who I'm named after, I think. My middle name is Shmuel.
Right. That's correct. That's correct.
And he didn't have any children. I think that's why I was named after him.
No, he had no children with his first wife, Dorothy, and he had no children with his second wife. The second wife, he got introduced to Aunt Ida, was his second wife, and she had been married and she had children with, I can't remember now. She had a nephew, Bruce Feldacker. But my mother introduced them. That's how they met each other.
So she was a shadchan.
Pardon?
She was the shadchan. If they're not,
yeah.
I mean,
she invited them both for a Friday night dinner to our house. I remember them being together. That was when we still lived on Westminster.
Cousin Adele now goes on to talk about the merit in using cousin, aunt, or uncle before the name.
I think there's definite merit in using those titles before the name. That's just beyond just using the name. Aunt Faye was always she was Aunt Faye. She wasn't really my aunt, but she was my father's first cousin. But we never called anybody by their first names. They were I had my relative aunts and my friend aunts. People lived on the block who were friends with my mom. I don't know who we had for, my mom would have a separate Hanukkah party for them. They were Jewish, but they weren't religious. And they were our friend aunts, we called them, because we never would call them by their first name.
Because it's disrespectful, yeah?
Right.
Today,
that's not the case. My granddaughter in Israel calls her in-laws by their first name. I was appalled. And she said, Bubby, that's what people do. Well, I didn't grow up that way.
Right. My wife's family, everyone's their first name. And even, Rabbi Newman, I call him Rabbi Newman, they call him Jeremy, the Mashgiach. He used to be the Mashgiach in Skokie Yeshiva.
Right.
I'm still not able to get used to just calling him Jeremy, but to me he was Rabbi Newman. But, what I thought was super interesting is, I don't know if you listened to this little thing that I made on Phyllis, on Aunt getting...
Yeah, I did. I listened to it. By the way, I wrote all the invitations for Jeremy and Faith's wedding.
Oh, wow. Because
I used to have a really nice handwriting, and I used to address just because I wanted to, not for cost. I didn't have payment for that.
You got that from your father. Probably nice handwriting.
My handwriting wasn't as nice as my father's. My father's was so fancy you could almost not read it. But my printing was quite nice at one time. Now I've become much shakier, and it's not like it used to be. But I wrote all the invitations for Neil Kirshner's wedding and for his bar mitzvah. I wrote all those invitations out.
So cool. Your father's handwriting was so fancy, you almost couldn't read it. So yours is
right.
Yours was just the right balance, probably.
Right.
Well, what I noticed, I was not expecting my wife to say anything on the Aunt Phyllis thing. Like, I haven't heard her voice. It's not like I prepared or asked her anything. And then all of a sudden, she's just enthusiastically just talking about Aunt Phyllis. And over there, she was very makbid. She always said cousin Judy, aunt. She always did say the cousin. And I just thought that was interesting. Like, I never told her to say cousin, and she kept saying it. Aunt Phyllis, cousin Judy. I don't know who else.
Well, I used to always sign off as cousin Adele. I never just said Adele. I've been doing it more lately, but I used to always say cousin Adele. Because that's how we grew up.
So that's something I should do. It's probably you read us. It's yeah. There's a song. Avram Fried has this song, and it's really a cool song. It's about Hashem sends this malach who goes around to all the different countries and asks them if they want the Torah in modern times. So the malach goes to Germany, and they ask what's in the Torah, and it says Lo Tirtzach, and you see in the video the Holocaust in the background. The song is in Yiddish, so I don't understand everything, but it goes to England and it says Lo Sachmod, or Lo. Some of the countries I don't get, but he comes to America, and America asks what's in it, and it says kibud av ve'em, and then America says, no, we only have Mother's Day, and we respect our youth, not our zakenim. So that just enlightened me, like, yeah, that is the nisayon of part of the nisayon of our times, just and this is probably part of it, of not putting a cousin before, or aunt or uncle. It's those things are just falling off. Maybe that's part of it.
I think another advantage of doing it, besides the respect, is that our children, our grandchildren, whatever, learn that there's a relationship. It isn't just the name Adele, it's cousin Adele. So they come away knowing that this person named Adele is actually a relative. Otherwise, just saying the name Adele, or just saying the name Simcha, or just saying the name Dove, or just saying the name Judy, has no bearing on a relationship. But if you put a title in front of it, like cousin, aunt, grandpa, then you know there's been a connection that's far different than just the name.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So that if you would say to your children, I just talked to cousin Adele today, they would know that this is a relative. Your girls probably know already, but the little ones don't. Understandably so. I think your mother does as well. I mean, Lois is very much into family. She's had family over, and she loves the Funk family. We've talked about this, and I have great respect for her because she's a very kind person, and she goes out of her way to help people in any way, shape, or form. And I'll tell you, all of Simcha and Shayna's kids are very much into family. Their girls are, and I know Ellie is, and I think also the son in Baltimore, all of a sudden I'm having a senior moment. I can't think of his name. He's Adele. Zevi, he's Adele. Yeah. Shayna, all of Shayna and Simcha's kids are very much into family.
Yeah, my mom moved. I thought when my mom moved here, and I think she probably thought this too, she was moving here just because she wants to be close to her grandchildren. I always think her grandchildren. I don't know about whatever. She's moving here to be close to her grandchildren. But now that she's here, her pictures in the CMC magazine, and like she's getting more around the community than I am, and I'm blown away. I was not expecting that at all. But
I want to tell you, she's a very, very sweet, special woman, and I feel very, very close to her. I feel indebted to her. I feel very grateful to her. She's taken phenomenal care of your dad. Phenomenal care. And you don't always see that. It's not easy. And I give her a lot of respect. You know, she was an only child. She comes from, and she's really out there. She tries to help so many different ways and so many people. She goes to the mitzvah place to help. She's always running and doing.
And Park Plaza, she volunteers at Park Plaza.
I'm telling you, she really has. And really, I feel we all owe her hakaras hatov for the person that she is. She's just a special lady. And thank God.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. It's nice to hear from an outsider a little bit. Not exactly, but... You also went through the same thing with your mom, right?
Not so. Don't forget, I had to be the breadwinner. So my mom came to live with me when she was 80. She lived with me for 8 years. But I had to go to work full time because my husband wasn't able to work very much. So I had to support a family. I had a teenage daughter at the time, still at home.
Wait, I didn't know that your husband wasn't able to work.
He worked part-time, but there came a time when he wasn't able to work. And so, you know, I had somebody in the house for my mom after a while because I had to make sure that, like, she one time took the tea kettle to make herself some tea, and she almost burned the house down with it because she put, like, just a little bit of water and put it on high. So I got rid of the tea kettle. And then I got a 30 cup so that she could always have hot water available to her. But I had to go to work every day. I got up in the morning at 5 in the morning. I ironed my daughter's clothes because I wanted them to look just as good as every other kid, if not better. I didn't go to bed till 1 or 2 every morning, and that's what I did for many, many years.
Well,
and I support a family.
The ironing of the clothing, in a certain way, sends a really strong message of love and care, because that's the extra detail and the extra mile that is not 100% necessary, but to you it was. And that's special.
I want.
The following 5-minute segment has been edited out, and we then continue from there. You said a lot of amazing things, but one of the things that you mentioned was that you worked for a company, I think maybe a pharmaceutical company, where technically you didn't really qualify regarding the degree. You only had a bachelor's, and you got and you got the job. And that's like a story that like these bitachon lines, or those types of lines, like you hear stories of people applying sometimes to a job where they're about not to, and then someone says, listen, the one who decides whether you get the job at the end is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So
That's
this is
right.
what you have, and just apply, and we'll see what happens. And that's what happened, it sounds like.
That is exactly right.
Cousin Adele now speaks about, it's a story where Papa Joe introduced, a certain baseball player wanted to set this baseball player up with cousin Adele, and it was one of his favorite stories. It's also it seems like it's one of my father's favorite stories as well, and that's where she takes over from here.
Yeah, because because Uncle Joe used to love telling that story because he was going to fix me up with his ball player. I said, that would have been the day. Then I couldn't have been Shomer Shabbos. That would never work because I would never. I remember when I started dating Art, it became more serious. And I said, this isn't going to work. And he said, why not? And I said, because we come from two different worlds. He said, well, like what? And
wait, who said like what?
Art, my husband. Yeah. And I said, well, there's certain things I will not compromise on. And he said, well, okay, so just tell me what they are. So I said, well, first of all, we have to be Shomer Shabbos. He said, okay, so what's the problem? I said, and also we have to be kosher. He said, and and he stopped eating in his mother's house. His mother would have preferred that he married a Gentile rather than marry me. My father-in-law didn't feel that way, but my mother-in-law gave me a very hard time. And then I said, and we have to observe Taras HaMishpacha. He said, tell me what it is in English. I don't know. And I told him what it was. He said, so I don't know what the problem is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so that's just amazing to me. That first of all, he really loved you.
Yes, indeed.
Well, there's a similarity maybe between him and Papa Joe. I don't know, because I was always trying to figure out how that should have worked. But it sounds like with Art, he just became almost like Orthodox just to get married to you.
He did. I remember one time he was going off to shul, and I've forgotten what the incident was, and I said something about what? We're not doing that. And I said, I came from the Orthodox home. He said, yes, but I'm Orthodox too. And so that was the end of that discussion.
Would you share how you met Art?
He was a neighbor. He lived right near my cousin Paul and my mom's side of the family in Chicago. And they were friends. They belonged to the same temple. They belonged to conservative shul.
So you met in a natural... It was a natural...
Two sisters.
You met naturally. It was a natural...
Right. It wasn't a shidduch. No, we met naturally. We were friends. I actually dated his best friend first, and then I started dating him.
The inspiration behind that story and with Dorothy Lefton also is just nowadays there's, not in the Hasidic world, I don't think, but outside the Hasidic world, there's a major shidduch crisis. It's a major crisis, at least in the yeshiva world, in Baltimore, New York, and just there's more, they say there's just more girls than guys, and really good girls are just not getting married. It's just super, super sad. I can't even imagine that. It just seems really painful because, these people probably grew up with like certain dreams that they thought they would have families and they're not. And they go to the shadchan and there's resumes.
But you never give up hope. You never give up hope.
Never give up hope.
They may not have children, but they may be able to marry somebody who's a widower who does have children, and they become for that person. So you never do give up hope, in my opinion.
Right, you never give up hope. But these stories, it just shows how if people would be more open to options, if you get rid of the resumes, I don't know, I don't think Joe left, and whatever his resume was, but from what I hear about Dorothy, I'm saying their first names, just I guess for clarity. What she would be looking for on a resume and what her father, Rav Yitzchak Meir, would be looking for, I'm sure Papa Joe's resume would fail, and the shidduch never would have even been considered.
They didn't have resumes.
I know.
Nobody had resumes in those days.
Right. But there's something to be said for that, because she got married. Both of you were marrying people that... I don't know if Papa Joe, I don't know what his level, he's close to Orthodox, but and had children who are all from, even there's some Talmud Chachamim, then, grandchildren, like it's just an amazing thing. And I don't know if Beis Yaakov girl, like the way they're being raised, I don't think they're going to be open to that at all.
The people you're talking about, in my opinion, the Funk women were very strong women. My mom was very strong, Aunt Dorothy was very strong, Aunt Jean was very strong, Aunt Faye was very strong. And I'm very strong in certain areas. My mom was very principled. She didn't like my mother's sister's sons married Goyim. My mother, who was so close with that sister, did not go to the wedding. And I'm sure my aunt was upset by my mom not being there. My mom would not sanction that, and she said, I do not approve of that, I will not attend. And that was that.
So your mom did not attend, and which wedding was this again?
My mother's sister's son.
Her nephew.
A nephew. He married one shiksa and he divorced her and married a second shiksa. And had a child with one. She didn't go, she didn't send a gift. She said, I'm sorry, but this is not... My mom was, as I said, very principled. You knew exactly who she was, what she stood for.
So it's not just the name Dino, it's all of you.
Right. So I think that we're very fortunate to have the family we've had. But do give Cookie a call and let her she'll tell you more of the Zephyrin side. Her mom was a Zephyrin. The Zephyrins came from Rock Island. We're lucky. We've got really nice family. And as does Sarit. Sarit's family happens to be mega size. I mean, huge.
They're really in touch with each other. With them, it's almost like everyone's an immediate family. It's just really amazing. The following was asked to be put in by cousin Adele. She writes, Simcha, I'll tell you a story about Grandma Dorothy, a very, very special story which nobody knew about for many, many years. Grandma Dorothy knew of people in St. Louis who were hungry. When she prepared for Shabbos, she would prepare extra food. She would then package the food, and she would go put it by their door. She went to the back door, unbeknownst to them, and then she would run away. She did this for many years. Nobody knew about it. Until one year she wasn't feeling well. She was sick and she called my mom, meaning Aunt Pauline, and she asked her if she would do the deliveries for her. And that was the first time that anybody in the family knew of such a thing that was going on. And they agreed she didn't want anyone to really know, so this story didn't become known until after she passed away. Cousin Adele said she asked that this story be put on because... She says, I want you to know that because this is the way your grandmother did very special things for people, unbeknownst, very privately, which is the greatest mitzvah of all. And then she signs off. I do want to add to that just a couple words, is that it's a beautiful thing that sometimes it's important for the recipient to know that someone cares about them. and to know who cares about them, to know someone loves them, to know who loves them. So ordinarily, there's no question, we say that when it comes to giving tzadaka or doing things like that, the best way to do it is in secret, and you don't make people feel bad. But if a person is experiencing like social isolation or even depression or, certain different things, a person has to be intuitive and to know what exactly the best way to go about in doing things is, because sometimes it really is very beneficial for the person to know specifically who it is that cares about them. And that's just a thought that I have. So I'm not taking away in any way, shape, or form from what Grandma Dorothy did. It's very wonderful. And I'm just pointing it out that sometimes it actually is beneficial for the person to know who's doing it. And also, with that being said, I think we now know why we only hear about all the good a person does after they pass away, because people don't want it known. A lot of times people don't want it known what they're doing, and it could be I'll listen to this episode again, this whole recording, and I'll see maybe I said something good about someone and maybe they don't really want it known, and maybe I'll have to take it out. Maybe it will be edited. I did edit out one thing already, a couple things already, and we'll see where it goes from there. The following comes from Rav Aaron Pessin, words about Dov, Meir Dov, tzadaka l'bracha. Rav Aaron Pessin, as we said, was a friend. We referred to him as Arla. He's also a talmud of Rav Chaim Kaniefsky. My daughter showed me his Sfarim in our house this past Friday night, and he beautiful things written about him, and he has some really nice stories about Dov. So listen in. And Dov was married to Aunt Pauline's granddaughter of Vivadina and is the father of 6 of Aunt Pauline's great-grandchildren. Passed away this past Hanukkah. The youngest is the age of 5, and he also has a grandchild of his own from his daughter Kayla.
I had the chance to spend a lot of time, quality time with Dov, especially when we were driving all the way from Los Angeles to New York over a period of more than a month. And I was so impressed and so in awe. He never complained. He always made a joke out of everything that happened. And we had a lot of different experiences, but he was always taking them with a smile, no matter what happened. It was so special to spend that time with him and to learn from him. I remember once we actually came from Israel and we landed in New York, and we were renting a car, and he's going to drive to meet his wife-to-be, and I joined him for the ride. So we were about to drive to Chicago, and this is a little before Waze came into being. So we landed, we pick up the car, and he says to me, "Watch this." And he goes to the lady behind the counter and he says, "Excuse me, can you give us directions?" And she says, "Sure." Thinking he's going to ask her, how do I get from here, Kennedy, to the 5 towns, maybe to Manhattan? So he says, "Excuse me, can you tell me, how do I get from here to Chicago?" The lady looks at him, "Chicago?" She never heard of such a thing. She says, "I don't think I even have a map all the way from here to Chicago." And he looked at me and he winked with that special smile that he had. Always tried to make people just feel great, feel comfortable. Always had a smile on. And I will always remember him for that. Making light out of serious situations just to make people feel at ease. Making everybody smile all the time. I miss him terribly. And I'm sure I will continue to miss him. But people like Dov have the great koyach to affect things from above more so than they had from down here. So Mitzvah Hashem, he is beseeching now on behalf of the entire mishpacha to only know simcha, to only know nachas. And Mitzvah Hashem soon, speedily in our days, we will reunite when Tchias HaMeisim takes place in Yetz Hashem Bekarov Mamash.
We spoke about the tzadaka of Grandma Dorothy and also the tzadaka of providing employment. So we're just going to do a quick hilchas tzadaka and then call it a night. This comes from Chabad.org. It originates from Maimonides, the Rambam, the 8 levels of tzadaka, Mishnah Torah, laws of charity. You could hear there's a lot of noise in the background, but I hope you can hear me. The greatest level above which there's no greater is to support a fellow Jew by endowing him with a gift or loan or entering into a partnership with him or finding employment for him in order to strengthen his hand so that he will not need to be dependent upon others. A lesser level of charity than this is to give to the poor without knowing to whom one gives and without the recipient knowing from who he received. For this is performing a mitzvah solely for the sake of heaven. This is like the anonymous fund that was in the Holy Temple in Yerushalayim. There the righteous gave in secret, and the good poor profited in secret. Giving to a charity fund is similar to this mode of charity, though one should not contribute to a charity fund unless one knows that the person appointed over the fund is trustworthy and wise and a proper administrator like Rabbi Hanania ben Tradion. A lesser level of charity than this is when one knows to whom one gives, but the recipient does not know his or her benefactor. The great sages used to walk about in secret and put coins in the doors of the poor. It is worthy and truly good to do this. If those who are responsible for distributing charity are not trustworthy, then it is worthy and good to do this. A lesser level of charity than this is when one does not know to whom one gives, but the poor person does know his benefactor. The greatest sages used to tie coins into their robes and throw them behind their backs, and the poor would come up and pick the coins out of their robes so that they would not be ashamed. A lesser level than this is when one gives to the poor person directly into his hand, but gives before being asked. A lesser level than this is when one gives to the poor person after being asked. A lesser level than this is when one gives inadequately, but gives gladly and with a smile. And a lesser level than this is when one gives unwillingly. Those are the 8 levels of tzedakah. We're ending off with that. And may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless all of us. May any good middos which has been in our family, may those middos continue l'dor v'dor. We should continue to practice them and build upon them. And tzedakah certainly is one of them. Talmud Torah is one of them, and we mentioned others as well. So thank you very much for listening. May Hashem bless all of us with good health, yeshiva das, and happiness, and may we all be zeichet and no tsar, only shalom.